This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 115, Give Me My Money. And so we've shifted from a trucking podcast to now we're a mob podcast.
Guido.
So we're gonna be breaking some kneecaps in this episode. I hope people enjoy it. No, it's called Give Me My Money, and we're gonna talk about why it's titled that. I'm Craig, your host. Over there, he's already said something. Hi, Chris.
How you doing, Craig?
Not too bad. Not too bad today. I'm repping really well. For those who aren't watching on YouTube, then you don't get to see my lovely hat. So I'm repping Motor Carrier HQ today, which reminds me, people can go to motorcarrierhq.com. Our, what do we call Motor Carrier HQ?
Sister company.
The sponsor of this show.
Kind of sponsors it.
So, as I've mentioned in the past, motorcarrierhq.com is where you can find lots of tools and tips and actual practical hands-on things to help you in your quest to either start or grow or continue in your very own trucking company. So motorcarrierhq.com. You can also go to haulinassetsllc.com to check out full show notes with all the links and the documents and all that stuff. And we're also throwing a third one into the mix. We're going to be talking about iThrive, I think, today.
Yeah, probably a little bit.
So we'll get there in a few minutes. But first, Chris, I got to ask you, how's your week been? Any updates for us, kind of off topic, before we dive into all this?
It's been a good week. Things are going relatively well. Nate and I, this last week, drove a little bit over an hour to meet up with a prospective driver.
Oh, wow.
that lives a little bit further away from us than typical. So we kind of met in the middle. But I think that just kind of goes to show how important it is for us to make sure we have a good feel of a driver that we hire before we actually hire them, willing to, we felt like a face-to-face interaction is better than just over the phone, and took the time to go out and do that. And she should start for us here in the next week or so. Wow.
Okay. But I've heard, Chris, that, from corporate America for the last 2 or 3 years that, hey, Zoom is just as good. It's just as good, Chris.
I don't know that I agree with that.
Only on podcasts.
Well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Oh, hey, what's that voice?
That wasn't me.
Chris, do you want to introduce? We have a guest with us. Over on the couch with you is, why don't you go ahead and introduce her?
This is Farrah. Farrah and I have been working together for
almost 6 years.
She working together at iThrive Funding, another one of my businesses that I'm a part of that does factoring. We're not really going to talk about factoring today, but we talked about Guido earlier on. Farrah is a real life Guido. She'll be breaking kneecaps, talking about how to do that, and essentially collect money. So yeah, it's an important skill to have.
We're gonna, Chris, we're just gonna get lit up over this episode from certain demographics. This is not gonna be pretty in the comments.
Yeah, probably not.
All right, so today we're talking about it's Give Me My Money is the title of the episode. Do you want to kind of get into this subject for us, Chris? Tell me what it is that you want to talk about.
I think the best way to do that is, are you a Parks and Rec fan at all?
I'm familiar with its work.
So you've got Mona Lisa Saperstein. Let's roll a clip of her real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Money, please.
Yeah, I don't recommend you use Mona Lisa Saperstein's collection techniques. Yeah, as we've talked about, also breaking kneecaps. I mean, that was kind of as a joke. Don't go out and do that kind of thing. That can get you not a good business
Legal
practice.
Disclaimer, Haulin Assets does not condone the breaking of kneecaps for the collection of funds.
Money, please. Money, please.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay.
Parks and Rec, one of my favorite sitcoms shows. Ron Swanson on it is just fantastic. So if that's not one that you've binged watch, get past the first season, not great. But after the first season, it is hilarious.
It is a good show. So when it comes to Give Me My Money, what you want to talk about then is the more formalized business tactic of accounts receivable.
Accounts receivables.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a funny name. Like I've always kind of wondered, I get receivables, you're receiving your money, but it's a funny way to call it. But That's what it is. We're going to kind of go through the process. It's an incredibly important thing. If you're not on top of it, then you're not going to get your money in time, and there's lots of things that can go wrong that can delay payments coming in. So this episode is more for listeners that don't use a factoring company, because a factoring company really does this piece for you for the most part. With that being said, even those who are using a factoring company, it's good to understand the process so that you can kind of hold your factoring company accountable, understand better what they're doing. And some of the things, especially the first few steps of the whole accounts receivable process, is applicable whether you use a factoring company or not. And so we'll talk about some kind of tips and tricks there that will help both those who do use one and those who don't. But this episode is going to be especially beneficial for somebody who does their own collections.
Yeah, and Farrah is going to be helping us out with that, because this is what she does all day, every day.
Yeah, so right? Farrah, for the first 3 years. 3 years at iThrive, she did just collections. This was her world. She understands it very well. She's actually, you'll see from as we go on, Farrah has a fun personality. She's
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, well, more fun than yours.
Oh wow! Okay, all right. Shots fired. Here we go.
So she transitioned into sales, and she helps clients kind of get set up. She's just a super helpful person, and so she helps our clients really well. Helps the guys that are just kind of getting started, and walks through the process. So she's no longer in collections, but she kind of does sales and client onboarding.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Farrah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to kick my first question to you before we get into kind of the specifics. Chris, you've already said accounts receivable is a funny term, but did you actually define it, or should I kick this to Farrah? What is accounts receivable? It's the money you're owed?
It's the money you're owed, yeah. So you complete a job, and
so much for kicking a question to Farrah. That was my mistake.
Farrah will answer a lot of questions here in a few minutes, but receivables is just the money that you're owed. So you complete a job, and you need to get paid for it, but it's just not an automatic thing. There's a process that needs to happen to make sure you get paid for it. And in trucking, it's relatively complicated compared to some other industries. Is it? Okay, so that was going to be one of my questions is,
I took Accounting 101, Chris, and by took, I mean failed. I think I've told that story already, but, I took Accounting 101. I've heard of accounts receivable. This should be just generically applicable across the board for any company, but it's more complicated, or it's different for trucking then? Farrah, that's a big question, but I guess yes or no. Like, is it more complex? Is it tougher?
Well, the nice thing about factoring, so if you are in the trucking business and you find you do get triggered and want to break kneecaps, you have a resource to go to for someone that can handle those things for you. But really, it's just about knowing, how and when to bill, following special instructions, which a lot of times, get missed when they're on a rate confirmation page that you kind of just scan through and you don't realize, I had to actually do A, B, C.
Right.
And then if you don't have someone following up on that regularly.
Yeah.
So.
And that's, so in this episode, then we're going to get into that process. What does it actually look like to run an accounts receivable side of the business? Right, Chris? Yeah. And you're going to be kind of firing off some questions of Farrah.
Yep.
Do you want to take over from here?
Let's talk about that. So we as Farrah and I were kind of planning through what exactly this, what we should talk about and how this is going to be the most helpful to clients. We kind of came up with, there's a 6-step process that iThrive really follows in the collections piece, and it should be the same for a trucking company. And the reason that we're bringing iThrive into this is because factoring companies, this is the world that they live in. This is what they do all day long, and they're very good at it. And I thought, you know what? Even for Haulin assets, we haven't been following this 6-step process as well. And it's even going to be good for us to kind of relook at our, collecting process and make sure we're doing things a little bit better. And so I thought iThrive would be a perfect, bringing Farrah on and her experience at iThrive would be perfect for this. So yeah, let's talk about these 6 steps. The first one is gather paperwork and kind of create the invoice. So Farrah, what are the pieces of paperwork that you need to look at and gather as you're getting ready to bill a client for a job you just completed?
So you want the rate confirmation page showing drop-off, pickup, drop-off location, how much you're getting paid. You're going to want your signed proof of delivery, and that means all pages, not just the signed page. So if you have 5 pages, you need all 5 pages. And then you're going to want to include any lumper receipts that would go with the load. Or if you were required to get scaled in and out somewhere, you're going to want to have all that on hand. Basically, anything that broker or shipper is going to need to get paid by their customer is what you're going to want to put in your invoice packet so that you can so you can avoid any delays in payments.
And what's kind of, if you don't have, let's say you're missing one of those pieces, you submit everything to the broker or the shipper, what has a tendency to happen?
So if you're missing something, you're going to have to communicate most likely with the freight agent. So whoever you book the load with, or with, if you worked direct with the shipper, you can talk with them, but you'll have to decide whether they're okay to approve if they can get that payment made with the missing documents, or sometimes they'll say, we can pay that only and when our shipper pays or our customer pays. So your payment could get delayed out 90 days depending on when their customer actually paid them. And sometimes they just don't pay you. Sometimes they don't pay you.
Yeah, that's kind of the point that I want to make with this, is that initial paperwork and gathering, making sure you have everything. And you talk about sometimes a bill of lading, the proof of delivery will have 5 pages on it, and one of the page gets stuck in the scanner, and so it only scans 4 out of the 5 pages. There are brokers and shippers out there, they don't want to pay you any faster than they have to. And so, you may send everything off thinking it's all hunky-dory, and 30 days, 40 days later, you realize, you haven't been paid. So you give them a call. Hey, you say, hey, where's my money?
Give me
my money. And they say, oh, well, you know what? There was 1 page missing off of the bill of lading. And so get us that. And then you get them that, and they're like, okay, it's another 30 days from now. And it just turns ugly. And you just, and so now all of a sudden that can kind of create a cash flow crunch for you. And so that's one of the reasons, going through each one of these steps and making sure you're following them diligently.
And that's important too. Just knowing they can restart their clock for 30 days just based on when they get everything they need.
Right.
So even if you get it for them and you billed them 45 days ago, it's like Chris says, well, great, you're at day 1.
Yeah. Is this thing that you guys are describing, the unkind business practices that you're describing here, is this really common across the board, the whole industry? Or is it, you're nodding. Yes. Okay. So it's not just there's these bad apples that you run across every once in a while. It's this is common. I
would say, and I could be wrong here, but I would say probably a good 50% of the companies are going to look for an excuse not to pay you on time. They'll still end up paying you eventually in most situations, but if there's a reason to delay it another 30 days, they're going to find that reason and delay it another 30 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a problem too, if you're communicating with your freight agent, okay, but they handle everything through their accounts payable department. So if that freight agent isn't relaying information to their accounts payable, then, you have a delay there. So factoring companies can be nice in that area too, just because they will usually be able to, bridge the gap between a freight agent or an accounts payable, or help kind of get communication rolling. Because let's be honest, Chris, how much time do you have driving down the road to make collections calls?
Not very much.
Yeah, it's a rough go sometimes.
And that kind of gets us to step number 2, where you've got all the paperwork gathered, yes, and you send it off to the company that you hauled the load for. And really the important piece here is that you send it to the right place.
Yes.
What can go wrong there, Farrah?
So if you send it to the freight agent and it needs to go to accounts payable, then, they didn't get the paperwork. You can't rely on your freight agent to be doing your billing for you. So definitely need to make sure it gets to the right place, and noting that there are some instructions sometimes that will say, you have to have this specific paper to your freight agent within 48 hours of delivery. So they might require that you show them a proof of delivery within 48 hours, but then you still need to bill that over to the correct billing department.
And one thing that's, just for people that may not understand exactly how brokerages work, oftentimes you've got what Farrah's talking about, the freight agent. And this is kind of the front-facing employee that the carrier typically works with. They kind of coordinate everything between the shipper and the carrier, make sure that, they make sure the load paperwork's all there. They handle the details of the load, make sure the load's delivered, communicate with the truck driver sometimes, definitely with the trucking company, whoever the dispatcher is, or if it's an owner-operator, the owner-operator. And so the agent does that. And so oftentimes what happens is you'll, as a carrier, you'll get everything done. You'll submit it to that agent that you've been working with. And the agent, maybe 75% of the time will just forward it on to the accounts payable or the accounting department where it also needs to go. But some of them don't. And so if you don't, and you don't also submit the paperwork to its technical term is accounts payable, or, their accounting department, it's like they've never received it. Right.
Yeah.
And that, and if
Which,
it takes
but from an outsider's perspective, it's bananas to think about, where it's like, hey, you all work for the same company. Just walk the papers across the hall. But that's not how it works, is it?
No.
That's another good excuse not to pay you within 30 days and pay you in 60. And so it's another one of those things you have to be careful. So how do you make sure, Farrah, that you're sending it to the right person?
You have to read the rate confirmation page. So, or if you are working direct with a shipper, you need to have that email or whatever provided to you by the shipper. So it will usually say send invoices or paperwork here. And you also need to know if it requires original documentation, that you are going to have to mail your original papers in if that's required, which is not a huge thing in this day and
less
age.
And less,
but
that's becoming a requirement. But
yeah,
it's so usually what I try to do is, if just because some of these guys are unscrupulous, I send it to everybody. So I'll make sure I send a copy to the freight agent, to the accounts payable, to their dog.
The shotgun approach.
Yeah, the shotgun approach. You're like, okay, somebody got it. And it's nice to be able to go through your sent email when they say, oh, I didn't receive that. And you're like, oh, yeah, here it is. Look, I forward the email I originally sent to you 25 days ago.
yeah.
So that's how you make sure you get it to the right person. So
we have 6 steps to go through. We've done 2, and I'm sensing that there's going to be a theme of precision or exactness, or this is not something you can be sloppy with.
Nope.
Paperwork you can never be sloppy with.
So so what's step 3
so step 3, and this kind of gets into more, those first 2 steps that we talked about are really things you absolutely have to do. Most of the rest of the steps are more of they're best practices, and they're going to help ensure that you get paid timely. So what iThrive does for the 3rd step is 7 days after the invoice is sent, you send an email to who?
We send it to the accounts payable department with either the shipper or the broker.
And just to verify that they've received all the paperwork.
Yeah, basically saying, do you have everything required in order to issue payment to this load? And if not, then what is missing so that we can relay that information over?
And you do that because that way at 7 days you're finding out if there's an issue rather than at 30 days.
Yeah.
And so instead of getting paid at 60 days, now hopefully even if there was an issue, you're getting paid at 37 days.
Right. Okay. All right. So yeah, if you have to reset the clock, you don't have to reset it back that far. Okay, good. And then what's step 4 then?
And then step 4, 25 days after the invoice is sent, another email is sent.
Yeah, and this email is usually just a basic payment status request, right? You're basically just saying, hey, what day is this payment expected to go out and to where? We always try to also ask to where.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is sounding like a kind of squeaky wheel type of thing, right? Just make sure that you're present, make sure that they know that you're watching.
Yeah.
In a way, right?
Yeah.
And really if there's a problem, to find out a problem earlier in the process rather than later in the process.
Okay. All right. So what was that step? Was that step 4?
That was
Am
step
I
4.
Crazy? Who am I?
Yep.
What is truth? Time is a flat circle, Chris.
Oh my gosh, are you getting philosophical
Oh
here?
boy, I blacked out for a minute
Can
there.
we turn his microphone off? You're in control of the microphones.
Okay, so what are we on? Step 5 then?
All right. So step 5. So this happens 35 days after the invoice was sent, assuming you haven't received a payment yet. So what do you do at this point?
You got to pick up the phone. You got to pick up the phone and call and say, where's my money?
money.
Show
money,
me the money, right?
Yeah.
How many movies can we get in here? Yeah. So it's important here at this point. It's not just sending an email. It's not anything like that. It's picking up the phone and calling.
Yeah.
And step 6 is really kind of the same thing, but we decided to make this as another step, is because you want to make sure you don't do this and you don't kind of get lazy with step 5. Is you keep calling every other business day until you've got some kind of resolution with this payment. And so, that typically means, if you either haven't gotten a hold of them, or you got a hold of them, they said, oh yeah, let me look into it. You kind of keep following up until, and typically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what do we consider resolution? Even if we haven't received a payment, like what kind of information can they give us that will make us feel comfortable enough that we say, hey, we're going to give them another week before we try to follow up again?
So if they can tell us the date it was paid out, where it mailed, and give us like a check number or like an ACH deposit number.
I was just going to ask, what's more common these days, electronic deposit or a paper check?
Electronic's getting more, and you can always know, like on the electronic deposit part, usually if you have not seen that deposit within 3 days, then you'd want to get back on the phone. It should be there by day 3. Whereas like a paper check or something, you might want to give that 7 to 10 days to allow it time to get there.
Got it. Let me ask you one more question before we go on with some other stuff. These steps that you've talked about and the precise, place to send things, or, who to ask about this, that, and the other. Does this shift with the size of your company? So I'm putting myself in the shoes of an owner operator versus, somebody with 10 trucks or somebody with 100 trucks. Are these 6 steps applicable across the board? It's going to be the same every time?
Yep. I don't think it needs to change one little bit for a big, huge corporation or a one truck guy.
Okay.
Bigger, I would say maybe you want to be a little more diligent because you're handling paperwork for multiple carriers, maybe
Right.
instead of, especially if you have the carrier sending their paperwork direct versus someone handling all your billing. That's a whole nother element.
All right. Well, there you go. 6 steps.
That's the 6
simple.
steps, and
it's
it-
easy.
It's pretty easy. It's not rocket science by any means, and it'll work like 80% of the time. Basically as we've laid it out. But there are some times you have to make a little bit of tweaks. Every company, big brokerages versus small brokerages operate a little bit differently. Some of them you can actually go online and see payment status and other things. Some you have to call, and so you kind of just have to learn the differences between the brokers that you work with, and kind of understand those and make little tweaks here and there. But generally, if you follow that process, you're going to have a pretty clean accounts receivable. And one thing that's really important with this too is you need to stay on top of your accounts receivable. And the way that you do that is through your accounting system. Like, I've talked about this quite a bit. I use QuickBooks. There's a report that I can pull that shows my accounts receivable detail, and it'll show how much of the money that I'm owed is somewhere in that 1 to 30 day period, and how much of it is 30 to 45 days old, and how much is 45 to 60. And you need to pull that report. I'd typically pull it a couple times a week.
Oh, wow. That much.
Yeah.
And would that go, again, for an owner operator? Because, Chris, you're talking about a bigger company, multiple companies that you worry about this kind of thing with. So I'm trying to picture myself. I'm on the road 5 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever. I am busy.
Yeah.
I'm driving. I'm loading. I'm unloading. When does an individual owner operator find the time to do this?
So when I was driving, the year that I was driving, the best time to do this kind of thing is when you're waiting at a shipper or receiver to get loaded.
Right.
Oftentimes you'll have a couple of hours at that point. And in reality, if you're staying on top of the receivables and you're doing this a couple times a week and you're kind of going through your list, okay, I need to send that 7-day email to these 3 guys, and you're doing that twice a week, you typically, you're not going to spend more than 30 minutes each time you do it on these tasks, maybe an hour. Now,
I also want to ask you about, and this can be for Farrah, about iThrive. It's a factoring company, right? And Chris, you've talked in the past about, well, how great it would be if everybody signed up for iThrive, right? But no, but in the past, what you've said was, hey, look, as long as you find a factoring company that's good, that works for you, use it, right? It can be really helpful. How does a factoring company fit into this process then? Can it help ease like an owner operator's load? Is it going to make it more complicated? Tell me how that fits in.
That's a good question. And in reality, a good factoring company is going to do steps essentially 2 through 6. The only thing the trucking company is going to have to do is gather the paperwork.
And then do you send it to the factoring company and they take care of it?
Yep. And they handle everything from there.
But if you are with the factoring company, we do still have, like with iThrive, you have access to an online portal. So if you wanted to go in and pull your own purchase reports and just see, I mean, we're handling all the back end stuff for sure, but if you still want to be involved in your business, everything is accessible to you all the time. So you can see, how many invoices are at day 30 and,
Does it, if I'm an owner operator and I've got some outstanding invoices that I've sent to iThrive or whoever, and, you guys are handling all of the steps 2 through 6. Does it then get messy if I'm calling people or emailing or
here's what's nice. When we have clients who are interactive, right, and they will ask us, they'll call their account manager and say, hey, I've noticed this one's at day 45. What can I do to help? Because sometimes we do actually need the carrier to make a call because not everyone wants to talk to a factoring company. Can you believe it? But they don't. So they'll want to talk to the client.
They don't want their kneecaps broken.
They don't.
They just don't know how nice Farrah is.
So true. So it can really help if they are being proactive, just watching their own books anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they're going to be calling and talking to you
Hopefully
about it?
They would call and talk to us.
Right,
and then
and
we
not go
could
over your head.
Yeah, because then we can kind of navigate. And if it's something like we're missing, most likely we're going to need the documentation first. If they send it, how do we know? So then you run into like, he said, well, who do I believe?
Hey, well, it could have been she said.
And then it's the kneecaps, Craig. So
that's step 7, right?
Yeah,
that's
step 7.
I'll tell you what, we keep talking about kneecaps. Yesterday, I walked 15 miles. So I would really appreciate it if somebody would just club my kneecaps and just take me out of my misery.
I think you need like some Epsom salts, maybe. That would be nice.
Something like that,
yeah.
Okay, good. So anything else any stones that I have left unturned or that we have left unturned as far as this subject?
As far as the process goes, no, but we do have some tips and tricks that we want to talk a little bit about.
Sure.
So maybe we move on to that. So, Farrah, what's the most important thing like that this whole process helps somebody do? Like, what's the most important thing that they need to do?
For getting paid?
For getting paid.
One of them that's going to go into account with all this too is making sure maybe the credit of the brokers and shippers you're running for. So, I mean, along with making sure that you're put together with your paperwork. And I mean, you also want to know you're running for people that can make the payment to you, right? And who are not doing any shady acts on the side.
So that's kind of one of the things that I talk a lot about in the podcast. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Sure.
Like that's one of my favorite things to live by in my life is to stay ahead of things.
Don't buy the pickup truck.
Or don't buy the pickup truck.
I hear that one a lot.
I feel like you should always buy the pickup truck.
But
okay.
Sorry, that was a deep cut for those who have been listening to the show for a long time. Don't buy the pickup.
So, you want to make sure that you're going to get paid by the company that you're going to do the work for. And one of the nice, this is kind of one of the advantages of working with a factoring company is most factoring companies will have a manner that you can go in and you can check credit for a broker shipper that you're hauling for. So you can go into the factoring companies in your online portal and you can type in the company's, like if it's a broker, their MC number or their name, and it'll say, yeah, here's like the average days to pay for this particular broker or shipper. And if it's 90 days or, something like that, you're going to say, I don't want to haul for these guys because I'm not going to get paid. And that's one of the advantages of working with a factoring company is you can see that up front, and you can see either how long they get paid, how long they take to pay, or if they just don't pay their bills very well. And you're like, I don't want to haul for this guy because I don't want to risk not getting paid.
Yeah.
Right.
So would that be one of these tips and tricks is let a factoring company kind of be your vanguard as far as checking out shippers and whatnot?
And yes, but we're actually going to try to launch something with this episode. As Farrah and I were kind of preparing to do this episode, I started to think, you know what? I wonder if iThrive can provide like a limited piece of this service to just everybody, to all the Haulin Assets listeners, because it is a good thing to have, so that it gives you kind of peace of mind that the company that you're working for or going to do work for is likely to pay you. And so we're actually people will be able to go into the show notes, and we're going to provide a phone number that they can give Farrah a call or shoot her an email, and she will be able to set them up with a username and password into the iThrive credit check system. And so people can just go in, no cost. And if the broker or shipper is in our database, we'll let them know, what their average days to pay is, and a few other little bits of important information that can kind of help them make these decisions. So it's actually a pretty cool little value that we're going to start offering for free.
Oh, for free?
Yeah.
Chris, you said the magic words, man.
The magic words. Yep. So go to the show notes for episode 115. We'll have Farrah's email in that, and then we'll have the phone number that they can call to get set up by Farrah into this free system.
Okay, awesome.
Did I miss anything on that, Farrah?
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't think I did either.
All right. Well, so if I want to review to make sure I got it, but basically make sure you have all of your paperwork. Number one, don't lose any pages, right, Farrah?
Don't lose it. And they're not napkins. They are not napkins.
Don't set your coffee cup on top of it. So make sure you've got every page of your paperwork. Make sure you send it to the right place, and to the right person, right?
Yes.
And then be a squeaky wheel. Keep in touch. Make sure that you're, what'd you say? 7 days, 25 days, and then 35 days. So make sure that you're involved in the process constantly, not just assuming that my money's on my way.
And the key for that is that kind of step 3, because, starting with that step 3, that's what a lot of, I think, owner operators and people that are kind of new to this, don't have a lot of experience. It's this step that they don't do. Like really that step 3 and 4, the 7-day email asking if they got everything, right, and then the 25-day email asking for payment status. Those more than anything help identify problems earlier rather than later.
Oh, and I would say to that too, like, let's say you are resolving an issue. So, they've requested a new, a better copy or whatever, and you send that over. I always recommend doing a follow-up on that, maybe within 48 hours, and just saying, did you receive that? So okay, everything's now on track.
So interesting. This actually reminds me, Chris, of a podcast I listened to years and years ago. We're talking like 2008. And it was back when I was in college. It was all about job searches and resumes and interviews and all that stuff. And they said, yes, you can have a perfect resume and here's how you write it. And you can perform perfectly in the interview and here's how you do it. But they said, what's going to really make you stand out more than anything else is your follow-ups. Anyway, it's reminding me of that in a way where it's like, look, you can send all the stuff off and just assume that you're going to get your money. And
75% of the time you probably will.
Exactly. Most of the time you probably will get your money, but what's going to make you even more successful than the next company is that follow-up, that making sure that you're constantly involved in the give me my money process, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm calling it, by the way. Chris, you said accounts receivable was a little awkward. Let's call it the give me my money department.
Yes. Yeah. I like it.
Okay.
We're going to start a new trend. It's going to be across every industry and every business before long. The give me my money department, AKA accounts receivables.
AKA in parentheses. Yeah. Okay, good. Anything else on AR then?
I just want to talk really quick about some of the more common issues that we see that cause delays in payments. And we've talked a little bit about most of these, but just really quick go over them. One, missing pages on the bill of lading specifically. Sometimes the rate confirmation can have multiple pages. Usually they don't care so much about that, but the bill of lading for sure, make sure you've got all the pages.
Okay.
And especially if there's multiple stops. That's a pretty common problem. The scans or the pictures that you take of the paperwork, and this is notorious for the trucking industry because you've got a truck driver that's trying to do it from the truck, and they're not always great. And so just make sure you've got a good scanning app or something on a phone, and that the picture that they take is good quality. Like what I would do when I was driving, I'd lay it down on the floor of the cab so you've got a black floor, and then take the picture with make sure there's light in the cab so it's light. And usually when you do that, you get a really good picture of the bill of lading and all the pages of it.
That makes sense. And when you were driving, would you carry around did you have a folder that was really nicely color coordinated or something, or just where did you keep all this paperwork? What did you do with it when you got it? I just had
essentially a manila envelope. Once I'd take the picture of it, I'd throw it in the manila envelope and just keep it. And then when I got back to the office, I'd put it in a file.
How long do you keep that?
3 years. Is that what we typically keep?
Usually.
Yeah, 3 years.
Is there any sort of requirement, legal requirement, or some kind of government mandated? You need to keep this on file.
I don't think it's a legal thing. It's just a good business practice in case there ever is an issue with the payment or anything like that.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Sorry, go on, Chris.
A couple other things. So missing signatures, make sure somebody signs that BOL before you leave the facility.
And the rate con is not the BOL. So I always do try to advise clients to keep some blank bill of ladings in their truck, because if for some reason your shipper does not provide you with one, that's your payment, right? So you want to make sure you have something that someone can sign.
If it's a missing signature, is that fixable? I mean, if you're halfway across the country and they're like, we don't have a signature, how do you?
It can be very difficult to fix.
Yes.
Is it fixable? Most of the time, but you're gonna want to pull your teeth before you have to fix one of those.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other? What did you say was most common things, like mistakes people make?
Missing lumper receipts. That's a pretty common one, and so and that usually doesn't necessarily prevent you from getting paid, but oftentimes it'll prevent you getting paid the full amount.
Yep.
And so make sure you include those lumper receipts.
Or if your bill of lading requires key rec stickers. Okay, this is a big deal. Key rec stickers.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to need a definition on that. Sorry.
I don't know what they are, but they are places like Walmart, Costco. They'll always have a key rec sticker that they're supposed to get when they drop. And if that sticker is missing, it's a nightmare.
Even look at you.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't pay at all. And if they do, it's delayed for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a sticker that usually has a barcode on it and a little bit more information.
And this kind of gets to your point then, Chris, of, every shipper is going to operate a little bit differently, have their own little quirks, and you got to get to know those.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And then also if there's any, another thing that causes delays oftentimes is if there's a claim or some kind of problem with the load, like there was a shortage or an overage or anything like that. I usually try to get some kind of resolution before we leave the facility when something like that happens. Make sure you communicate well with the broker so everybody knows what's going on, and
take
try
pictures even there, before you leave. Document.
And now we're getting, oh man, this is just good life advice, not just good accounts receivable advice, right? Document.
That's true.
If you're renting,
communication, instructions.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All that's important. Communication's really, that's really kind of the general theme across this whole, invoicing collections process is communicate.
Yeah.
Over communicate.
Okay. And the theme of this show is jets flying over. So
yeah, it happens.
Okay, good. I feel like we've covered it. Any final thoughts on accounts receivable for either of you?
Do you have any?
No, I got nothing. Maybe these jets are dropping money. 'Cause give me money. You know?
We'll have to go out and look.
Yeah, I'm going to go see.
I'm really excited for the giant brick of cash that's going to land in my backyard. Okay.
Yay!
I'm sure that's what the F-16s are doing all day.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Chris, do you, as we move away from this subject and prep for our next episode, do you have any impact tips to leave with us today?
I actually do have one today. Yeah.
Gasp.
We do.
What do you got?
Do something that's going to strengthen your personal finances.
Okay. And what is that?
Anything.
What am I supposed to do?
Just find something that you can do that's going to strengthen your personal finances. I kind of liken, this is one of those things that you, if you've ever flown on an airplane, which most people have.
Mostly F-16s, but yeah, sure. Uh-huh.
The sound is appropriate. Then when the flight attendants kind of go through their starting spiel,
right. Which I totally still listen to every time.
You pay 100% attention. You're a good boy. The oxygen masks drop down. What do they say to do?
They say put it on yourself first and then help others.
And the reason behind that is because
if you die, you can't help anybody.
You can't help somebody else, right? So you want to make sure you're in good health and you're taken care of so that you can help others. And it's kind of the same thing with your personal finances. If your personal finances are not in a good place, it's going to cause a lot of stress on your business finances too. And so, that's one of the things that I kind of try to do constantly with my personal finances is just make sure, I'm following good financial practices so that I'm not putting stress on my company. And this is one of the things that we talk about all the time. Don't buy the pickup truck. Why? Because if you buy that pickup truck and you can't really afford it, you're going to have to take money out of your business every month to make that truck payment, and that can put some serious financial stress on your business and make it so that you make bad choices. And so do something to strengthen your personal finances.
I want your number one or maybe two, like, quick fire. What can somebody do to strengthen their personal finances? I
think a couple of the very most important thing as far as personal finances goes is to have an emergency fund. We've talked a little bit about Dave Ramsey in the past. What he says that should be is $1,000. $1,000 in your savings account minimum. That's the starting point. That's the first thing you should have in case something, like your water heater breaks or you've got to replace something on your car, one of those life emergencies happens. That's what that $1,000 is for.
Okay. All right. Build up an emergency fund. I love it.
And if you don't have that, then the next step is I think a 3 to 6 month fund in case, you lose your job or maybe you have 2 or 3 months in the trucking industry where things just aren't going super well and you're not making a lot of money and you can't take money out like you normally would. And so that's a good personal financial habit to have, is to have that little bit of a slush fund so that in the dry times you can get by so that you can take advantage of the good times.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks for the impact tip. And thank you, Farrah, for coming on today. Much appreciate your wisdom in money getting, really.
Money getting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me my money. Get me my money. Whatever. I don't care.
Either way is fine.
And thanks to everybody for listening. Once again, Haulin Assets LLC is where you can get full show notes. Motorcarrierhq.com is where you can get all the tools and the tips and all that stuff that we've talked about in the past. But today's theme being accounts receivable. Where do they go for iThrive?
iThriveFunding.com.
iThriveFunding.com. And that's the letter I, right? So iThriveFunding.com.
Kind of like iPhone, but iThriveFunding.com.
See, that's how we know you're hip. It's got a little I in front of it, right?
That word is usually not associated with me.
That's true, unless we're talking about how old you are and the
replacements
that we're going to need to get for you.
That's true.
My knees and your hip. So, all right, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you in a couple weeks for, I think, another financials episode coming up. So we'll see you then.
See you.